Rain slammed against the rusted zinc roof as David Cole shoved the broken wooden door shut behind him. The shack shook under the wind, and for a brief second, silence swallowed the sound of the storm. His shoes were soaked, his designer wristwatch hidden beneath a torn sleeve, his breath uneven. He stood still. This was it. The billionaire who owned glass towers and private jets was standing inside a one-roomed shack that smelled of damp wood and old smoke. A cough came from the corner. "You lost, stranger?" a rough voice asked. David turned sharply. An old kerosene lantern flickered to life, revealing a woman seated on a low stool. Her face was lined, her eyes sharp despite the darkness. She studied him with suspicion, not awe. "No," David replied carefully. "I'm not lost. I'm looking for shelter." The woman scoffed. "Everybody is looking for something these days." Thunder cracked. The roof groaned again. "My name is Mama Grace," she said, "and this place is not an inn." David nodded. "I can pay." She laughed once, short, bitter. "You people always say that." "You people?" he asked. "Men who arrive in the rain with soft hands and city accents," she replied. "You don't belong here." David swallowed. She was right. He didn't belong here, but that was the point. "Please," he said, "just for the night." Mama Grace stared at him for a long moment, then gestured to a wooden bench. "Sit. If you try anything foolish, I'll scream. People here don't ask questions." "I understand," David said, lowering himself onto the bench. The cold bit into his bones immediately. As the storm raged outside, David's mind drifted backward, to the meeting room with glass towers, to the applause, to the polished smiles. "Profits are up," one executive had said earlier that morning. "Record numbers." David had smiled, nodded, signed documents worth millions. But something had felt wrong. That night, alone in his penthouse, he had watched a documentary about rural displacement, villages erased, lives shattered, all in the name of development. One image refused to leave his mind. A woman standing beside a collapsed shack, holding a child, staring at the ruins of what used to be her home. His company's logo flashed briefly in the background. "Coincidence," his assistant had said when he asked, but doubt had crept in, and doubt had led him here. Mama Grace shifted. "You don't look like a laborer, no calluses." "I work with numbers," David replied. She chuckled. "Numbers don't feel hunger, people do." The words landed hard. Another voice joined in, a younger one. "Mama, who is he?" A teenage boy stepped forward from behind a hanging cloth. His clothes were patched, his eyes alert. "A stranger," Mama Grace said. "Go back to sleep, Samuel." Samuel studied David openly. He looked scared. David let out a small breath. "I'm not scared." Samuel tilted his head. "Then why are your hands shaking?" David looked down. They were. He clenched them slowly. Mama Grace rose and poured water into a chipped cup. "Drink. You'll need strength if you want to last till morning." "Last?" David echoed. She met his eyes. "Night teaches lessons you don't forget." As hours passed, the rain softened into a steady drizzle. The shack remained dim, alive with quiet sounds. Breathing, wood creaking, distant voices from neighboring huts. David listened. A baby cried somewhere outside. Footsteps passed. Someone coughed violently in the distance. "This place," David said softly. "How long have you lived here?" "All my life," Mama Grace replied, "and my mother before me." "Does the government help?" She laughed again, louder this time. "Help. They come during elections. They promise roads, schools, water, then they disappear." Samuel sat closer to David. "They said a company is coming to build something big, a factory." David's chest tightened. "What kind of factory?" Samuel shrugged. "They say it will bring jobs." "And did they ask you?" David asked. Mama Grace answered instead. "They never ask, they inform." Silence stretched. David felt sweat on his back despite the cold. "What happens to your homes?" he asked. "They say we'll be relocated," she said calmly. "They always say that." "And are you?" he pressed. Mama Grace leaned closer, her face illuminated by the lantern. "No one has ever come back to tell us where there is." A sharp knock interrupted them. Mama Grace stiffened. Samuel froze. Another knock, harder. "Open up," a man's voice barked. David's heart slammed. Mama Grace whispered, "Don't speak." The door creaked open. Two men stood outside, rain dripping from their jackets. One held a clipboard. "We're counting households," the man said, "for records." Mama Grace folded her arms. "You counted last month." "And the month before," Samuel added. The man ignored them, eyes landing on David. "Who's this?" "A relative," Mama Grace said quickly. The man squinted. "He doesn't look local." David forced himself to breathe evenly. "He lost his job," Mama Grace continued, "came to stay." The man smirked. "Everyone loses something before progress comes." He scribbled on the clipboard. "You'll be informed soon. Pack light." They left as abruptly as they arrived. The door shut. Samuel whispered, "They're coming soon, aren't they?" Mama Grace didn't answer. David stared at the door, his pulse roaring in his ears. This wasn't a documentary. This was real. And for the first time in his life, David Cole understood something terrifying. He wasn't watching the consequences of power. He was sitting inside them. Morning came without mercy. David woke to shouting outside the shack. His body ached from the hard bench, his clothes stiff with dried rain. Before he could sit up, the door flew open. "Move! Everybody move outside!" Men in reflective vests flooded the compound. One carried a megaphone, another filmed with a phone. Mama Grace was already on her feet. "What is this?" "Inspection," the man with the megaphone barked. "Government directive. This land has been acquired." "Acquired by who?" someone shouted from outside. "Questions later," the man replied. "Step out now." Samuel grabbed David's arm. "Don't say anything," he whispered urgently. Outside, dozens of villagers gathered. Women held children. Old men leaned on sticks. Fear buzzed in the air like electricity. A man in a clean white shirt stepped forward. "You've all been informed," he said smoothly. "Development is coming. You should be grateful." Grateful. Mama Grace stepped out of the crowd. "We asked where we are going." The man smiled thinly. "Arrangements are being made." "When?" she demanded. "Soon." "That's what you said last year," another woman cried. The man's smile vanished. "This is not a discussion." David felt his chest tighten. He recognized that tone. He had used it before, in boardrooms, on conference calls. Authority without accountability. One of the officers pointed at Mama Grace's shack. "This one is marked." "Marked for what?" asked Samuel. "Demolition," the officer replied, casually. Mama Grace inhaled sharply but didn't cry. David stepped forward before he could stop himself. "You can't just destroy their homes without relocation." Every head turned. The man in white studied him. "And you are?" "A resident," David said, forcing his voice steady. The man laughed. "You don't look like one." David met his gaze. "I look like a human being." A murmur rippled through the crowd. The officer with the megaphone raised it again. "Everyone clear the structures." Bulldozers roared to life behind them. Samuel's voice broke. "Mama!" Mama Grace placed a hand on his head. "Stand strong." The first bulldozer lunged forward. Wood splintered, tin screamed. A woman screamed too. David watched in disbelief as a neighbor's shack collapsed in seconds, years of life reduced to rubble. "Stop!" David shouted. "Stop this!" The man in white turned to him, irritated. "If you obstruct this process, you'll be arrested." "For what?" David snapped. "For caring?" The man stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Go back to wherever you crawled out from. This doesn't concern you." David laughed bitterly. It concerns all of us. The bulldozer moved toward Mama Grace's shack. No, Samuel cried, running forward. David grabbed him just in time. Please, Samuel begged the officer. This is our home. The officer hesitated for half a second, then looked away. The shack fell. Mama Grace closed her eyes as the roof collapsed inward. Something inside David broke. He felt heat rush through him, rage, guilt, shame, all colliding. He had signed papers that led to this. Maybe not this exact shock, but others, too many others. The crowd dispersed slowly, stunned and silent. Mama Grace sat on the ground staring at the ruins. David knelt beside her. I'm so sorry. She looked at him then, really looked. Sorry doesn't rebuild walls. I know, he whispered. She searched his face. Who are you? David opened his mouth, closed it. I'm someone who helped cause this, he said finally. Her eyes narrowed. You work with them? Yes, he admitted, but I didn't know, not like this. She laughed softly, hollow. You people never know until it touches you. Samuel wiped his face angrily. So what now? You'll go back to your city? David shook his head. No. Mama Grace studied him carefully. Words are easy. Then judge me by what I do next, David said. That night, the villagers gathered around small fires. Anger replaced fear. They think we are nothing, one man said. They want to erase us, another added. We must fight, someone shouted. And how? Mama Grace asked. With sticks? David stood. Every eye turned to him. I have influence, connections. They laughed bitterly. You, one man scoffed, you couldn't even stop one bulldozer. David swallowed. I can expose them. How? Mama Grace asked sharply. I'll document everything, names, faces, orders. Samuel leaned forward. And if they arrest you? Then people will ask why, David replied. Silence followed. Mama Grace rose slowly. If you are lying, you will regret it. I deserve that, David said. She nodded once. Then stay. The days that followed were brutal. More structures were destroyed. David recorded secretly, conversations, threats, bribes. One night, 2 men cornered him. You're asking too many questions, one growled. David smiled weakly. Curiosity is dangerous. So is bravery, the man replied. A fist slammed into David's stomach. He collapsed, gasping. Leave, or the next time we won't. David limped back to the camp, blood on his lip. Samuel saw him and panicked. Mama! Mama Grace cleaned his wound silently. Still want to stay? She asked silently. Yes, David said without hesitation. She nodded. Then you're one of us now. David lay awake that night, pain throbbing, listening to the village breathe. He thought of his penthouse, his bed, his safety, and for the first time he didn't miss them, because comfort had blinded him, and truth had finally found him. The warning didn't slow David down. It sharpened him. At dawn, he followed the officials again, this time farther than before. He kept his distance, phone hidden, heart pounding every time someone glanced back. By noon, he had enough. Recordings of threats, footage of forced evictions, a signed document stamped with a name he knew too well. His own. David's breath caught as he stared at it. His company's subsidiary, his authorization, his signature. This wasn't corruption happening around him. It was corruption happening through him. When he returned to the village, Samuel was waiting. They came again, Samuel said. They took 2 men. David clenched his jaw. On what charge? No charge, Samuel replied. They said, questioning. Mama Grace listened quietly as David explained what he'd found. When he finished, she asked one question. What will you do with it? David didn't hesitate. Everything. That night he sent the files. Not to his lawyers, not to his board, to journalists, activists, international watchdogs, every contact he had ignored for years. Then he turned off his phone. By morning, the village buzzed with tension. 2 black SUVs rolled in. Men in suits stepped out, faces tight. David recognized one immediately. "Sir," the man said carefully, "we need to talk." The villagers gathered instinctively, forming a loose circle. "This is a private matter," the man outed. David looked around, at Mama Grace, at Samuel, at the faces marked by loss. "No," David said calmly, "it's public." The man lowered his voice. "You've caused a serious problem." David smiled thinly. "You caused it. I just stopped ignoring it." "You don't understand what you've done," the man hissed. "The board is furious. Investors are pulling out." "Good," David replied. The man's patience snapped. "Come with us." David shook his head. "I'm not going anywhere." 2 security men stepped forward. Samuel moved beside David. "You'll have to take all of us." Mama Grace joined them. Then another villager. Then another. The man in the suit scanned the crowd, calculating. Cameras were already out, phones raised. He cursed under his breath. "We'll be in touch," he said finally, retreating. The SUVs drove away. A cheer erupted, shaky but real. That afternoon, the story broke. Headlines exploded across screens. Billionaire exposed in forced evictions. CEO turns whistleblower against own company. Man sleeps in a shack, uncovers corporate abuse. David watched the news on a cracked phone as his name scrolled across the screen. Samuel stared at him. You're that man?" David nodded. "I am." Samuel's eyes widened. "Then why are you still here?" David answered honestly, "Because this is where the truth is." The backlash was swift. Accounts frozen, board seat revoked, lawsuits filed. David's lawyers called nonstop. "Come back," one pleaded. "We can control this." David declined. Weeks passed. Government agencies arrived, not to demolish, but to investigate. The detained villagers were released. Demolition orders were suspended. Temporary housing was approved. For the first time, the village breathed. One evening, Mama Grace sat beside David. "You lost everything," she said quietly. David shook his head. "I lost illusions." She nodded slowly. "What will you do now?" David looked around, the children playing, the men rebuilding, Samuel laughing for weeks for the first time. "I'll rebuild," he said, "but not alone and not like before." Months later, the shock was gone. In its place stood a modest community center, training rooms, legal aid desks, a small clinic. David no longer slept on hard benches, but he still returned often. He listened more than he spoke. One afternoon, a reporter asked him, "Do you regret it?" David glanced at Samuel, now helping younger kids with schoolwork. "At night," David said, "I sleep better than I ever did in silk sheets." The reporter smiled. "Any advice for people watching?" David turned to the camera. "If this story moved you, don't scroll past it. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment, because the next truth might be closer than you think." He paused. Because change doesn't start with power, it starts with seeing. Mama Grace stood beside him, nodding. The camera pulled back. Once, David owned skyscrapers and stocks and silence. Now he owned responsibility, and the truth he learned sleeping in a shack, it cost him everything and gave him something worth far more. If you stayed till the end, you're part of this story now. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment, because the next truth might be closer than you think.